You're listening to Data Center Therapy. Please take a number, and an engineer will be right with you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Data Center Therapy. I am your host, Matt Yeti.
And I'm Matt Casolino.
Matt, that was great. Thank you. We talked about trying to do it a little different way that flowed so nicely. And the explanation of the flow probably broke it up, but hey, this is still a new thing. We're still feeling it out. Matt, how are you doing lately?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I hear congratulations are in order.
They are.
Oh, they are. A little self-pat back pat, huh?
Yep, a little bit.
You are a brand new VCP, from what I've been told.
I am a brand new VCP. This is actually, I don't think this is my first one, but yes, I've just got another one in network virtualization. Yay.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Well, VMware's big thing right now is the software-defined data center. So network virtualization is the networking portion of that. How do you define policy as code? How do you define connectivity as code and make that reproducible and scalable? So to that end, we've got virtualized networks.
And this is around NSX, I would assume.
Absolutely. The hilariously fun thing is I've got a VCP network virtualization for NSX-V, and as I was getting all spun up and ready to do that, VMware announced that we're going to shift the focus from V to T, so let's go relearn everything and start over. A lot of the concepts carry over, but as usual, there's a new way to approach it.
Sure. So I want to tease the future of where we're going to have an episode where we deep dive fully into the differences, what the path is going forward. I think there's an awful lot to parse and unlock with NSX.
Oh, God,
but,
yes.
50,000-foot high level, can you give us a quick bite on what the difference is, without spinning up a whole episode of it?
So the biggest difference between T and V is how management happens. And there's some other technical things beside that or along with that, but effectively we've moved vCenter out of the mix in that we aren't configuring any of the network components through vCenter. They're all configuring natively through T, and it's just a plug-in to vCenter and the ESX host. That gives us the ability to now work with other hypervisors and Amazon and Azure and without having to rely on this vCenter component.
I think that's smart, right? Because they could have just gone by way of, well, you need to be vSphere all around, and I think they would have kind of cornered themselves, especially with the cloud direction.
Absolutely, yeah.
Capabilities-wise, are they the same?
Yeah, there's so NSXT, the version I'm working with in the lab right now is 2.4 versus 6 something on NSXV. So there's some things like we don't have the solutions providers available. So like the Palo Alto integration, the Trend micro integration, that kind of stuff isn't done yet because the vendors haven't done that work yet, or they aren't complete with that work yet. But for the most part, you get the same set of functionality. You get that per VM firewall and ability to work with your security policy inside of a app.
Yeah, in my opinion, the biggie. You said per VM firewall, micro segmentation.
Yep.
Same thing, and that I find to be what my customers are asking me about. Hey, how do I get better security? How do I react to an incident on a per VM level and then protect the rest of my environment should there be a security incident? But a little side note, it's got to be frustrating because a lot of times you're sold by marketing the promise of the new, and this is going to do all these great things. It is kind of disheartening to have the rug pulled out and say, hey Matt, that VCP of that version, we're going to switch that. It definitely is buyer beware for early adoption of technology, which doesn't jive with how it's being sold sometimes, right? That this is the next greatest thing, even though they're not sure how they're going to sell it or package it yet, and they might shift that, early in the cycle.
Absolutely. There's some learning that has to happen. Like, I assume my assumption of the how they built it was that we own vSphere, we own all of this. Let's build this virtual networking and integrate it with the things we own. And
Hmm.
then as we grew, we discovered that, hey, you know what? We actually need to decouple this a little bit and, shift this workload over here and move that management point over there. So it
Yep.
kind of
But
makes sense, but it's kind of annoying.
absolutely, absolutely. But you're also better off with the understanding of where it came from too, so you
Right,
have a better grasp of the foundation.
right.
Very cool. Well, that's not what we really wanted to talk about, but you were also at the Empower conference, right?
Yes, sir.
Tell me about this because they make me stay here. They don't they
They
don't jet set me around. I have to
don't jet set you
record.
around. Um, so Empower was a technical VMware conference. So everyone that was there was from Avar, from VMware technical side. It was all internal like that. It was a little smaller of an event, so it was inside of. I think we were at the Hilton in Atlanta, Georgia, which was fairly nice as far as weather goes. It was a little humid. You could feel that getting up there, but not not like the jet setting capital destination that I'd want to go to. So,
Poor you.
I know, right? Um, so what do we have? We had lots of content around NSX. That's kind of where I focused a lot of my energy. And I know we've talked in the past about containers, so I spent a little time with the PSK labs and
Which I still want to follow up on with yet another episode.
of course, all of the episodes. Um, so for me, it was NSX. It was containerization. How does that work? How does that automation piece fit in? There's so many just tools that have a lot of overlap and have a lot of special, unique things that they do. But are is this the right tool? How do I leverage that tool in my environment? That's a whole lot of questions, and it was good to be able to have some very smart technical people to go ask the questions of, and kind of be immersed in that technology and hear something in a session, ponder it, and think on it for a minute, and then go to the open floor forum and corner of someone and say, hey, so how's this work? How's that work? Let me specifically ask some of these questions of you.
That draws me, to be honest. When you say a technical focus conference, I've been to VMworld, and in recent years, I feel like it's become more marketing and less deep dive tech.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that has its place, right? But in terms of the Empower conference and in deep dive sessions, I remember I went to NetApp Insight a few years back, and that was a technically focused conference meant for partners at that point. And it's the same kind of thing. I got so much out of it because it wasn't about selling a product. It was say, hey, we want to empower you to empower our mutual customers to take advantage of these. And the only way to do that is to give us the knowledge on how to actually take advantage of it. So it's got to be a technical conference. That was great for me.
Yeah. For me, it was the ability to have more time with it, more time dedicated to it, because so often we get these hour, 2 hour WebEx things,
Right.
and we sit through, and it's here's all this data, and then you walk out of there, and you're like, wow, that was a lot of data, and now what? And then you have to spin back up and get back into that, find someone to go ask those questions of.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you were able to go, and I'm glad you got something out of it. And the where the most is happening, right, is that software-defined data center. It is in the NSX and the automation,
Yep.
and that's the meat right now. There's not a whole lot happening at the hypervisor level in the greater vSphere environment. I mean, that is kind of like the known quantity, and there's not a whole lot of a ton of advancement there. I think we'll get to that because the main topic that we mean to speak about here on this episode is vSphere 6.7 Update 2. And while we'll talk it through all the main headlining features, I think you'll find, and this is not a negative comment, but you'll find that there's not a huge jump out at you. Look how amazing this is. And I always go back in the mid 2000s, vMotion, how
Mm-hmm.
life changing that feature was for IT and the enterprise and operations. And I have to kind of just give it up and say there might not be another vMotion moment for me. But hopefully, it's a matter of turning your expectation to where the new hotness is, right? And being
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. That's cool. So one of the main headlining features of 6.7 Update 2 is that external PSCs, Platform Services Controllers, are now deprecated with this release. To go into it just really briefly, because we are going to deep dive into what the PSC is and its architecture, how it fits in with vCenter, SSO, etc., in a future podcast. Uh, Long story short, PSCs are essentially your authentication realm where that lives. It's kind of the base functionality that vCenter and vSphere lives upon to coordinate and manage your virtual environment. So for a while there, when the PSC was introduced and they were pulling these functions like SSO out of vCenter and into its own platform, and then vCenter would depend on that and connect to that, there was the option to install it with vCenter still, even though it was a separate component, or there was the option to deploy external PSC controllers, which were essentially vCenter appliances with vCenter stripped out, and you could do HA, pardon me, and load balance them, etc. And it really served to create, in my opinion, a ton of confusion. Uh, do I really need these? What are my failure scenarios where I'm protecting against whatever might happen? How does this help? And now here we are, full circle, and they're deprecating external PSCs. They're not getting rid of PSCs, but they're saying no more external deployments. They will be embedded with the vCenter appliance now going forward. All that is to say, the main feature tied with this update 2 that's related to the external PSC deprecation is the server conversions tool. They released a tool in update 1 that lets you go from an external deployment and get you back home. It seems like a lot of their engineering efforts, their dev efforts, have been to engineer themselves out of the corners they kind of engineered themselves into, right?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
why am I? Oh yeah, migration from vCenter to version to version. Remember we had that 5.5 to 6.0 where you had to land
Bit of a
on the
jump,
special
yeah.
M version of 5.5 to get you to 6.0. It didn't used to be that difficult or complex, but we were talking about fewer major versions out there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you were on 4.1 or you were on 5.0 or 5.1 or 5.5. Now it just seems like,
Now we're revving every other day or something, right?
and it also seems like as the product matures, people are a little more reluctant to jump off their maybe old slash unsupported version.
Yeah.
So they've had to support dragging people from the old unsupported versions now, and things as they get more complex. I think there's a lot more moving parts, and maybe the PSC has something to do with that. But in update 2, that convergence tool they call it, it has health checks. It does replication status. It's a nice GUI integrated with the HTML5 interface. It is supposed to be smarter, and it's supposed to be more reliable and faster and gives you a better picture into what your PSC migration looks like.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a main one. You're going to like this next headline feature. I do too, and it ties in with everything. And you talked about automation.
Yeah.
I think it's a big deal, is the vCenter security logging. So this now lets you keep an eye on SSO operations, user activity, user management, who did what in your
Okay.
vSphere environment. Now what do you think?
Do we get like a TACAX style interface where you can see who ran what, who did what, combined with the other side of that, the you're logged on with this level of authorization, so you can only do these kind of things? Like, is it full on TACAX embracing, or is it kind of
Well,
light?
they've always had role-based access control.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I guess to the point of I can write a rule on my ICE server to say you can go sh and hit enter and it'll work, but or no, you can't hit sh. You have to type out show as a full command, right? I can do that kind of granular stuff. Is it?
So I don't think this is what we're talking about.
No?
This is more like the logging of what's going on. Before it was, pretty not very granular in terms of what operations were happening and who performed them could be obfuscated. Now, this is obviously coupled with vCenter Login Insight,
Okay.
which is, or vRealize Login Insight, which is one of my favorite underrated tools in the vSphere suite. Right? Have you used it at all?
I just got that one deployed in the lab, and I got Network Insight deployed in the lab, and I'm working on getting some logs in from the some of the other systems I've got running. But the vCenter integration was spectacular. We use
Yeah.
it in our NSX class. It was really easy to see what's happening at any given time and try to correlate events between one side and the other. Is it
Right, and there used to be one big funnel, right? Here's your
Mm-hmm.
vSphere Fat client. You've got to log in because you're part of the domain admins group or whatever, and and have at it.
Mm-hmm.
And with more and more automation and scripts, I mean, you're not going to give a script any more rights than it absolutely has to. Best practice design wise, you wouldn't
Right.
want to.
You shouldn't. Yeah.
But so much of the I think of it from a security standpoint. So much of the posture involves in response to an attack or an incident is what happened. How did we get here? And like we've talked about the malware attacks, where you can't restore to yesterday's backup because that backup has the virus too. It just hasn't kicked off.
Mm-hmm.
So the ability to go back post mortem and say what happened and how do we use that information to improve our posture going forward. So I've always been a big fan of vRealize Log Insight. It's I would say it's a customer who's heard Splunk, who's
Yeah.
heard of that product,
Yep.
and then looks at the price tag and is like, "Ooh, okay, wait." And it's based on capacity and how much data. So, if I don't want to hit my license limit, I have to back off on what I'm collecting from my firewall. I don't want to do that.
You want to see it all.
Right. I want to see it all because all of it's important.
Yep.
So it's really been a great alternative, and it plugs in with a ton of third-party products. There's the modules that plug in that basically allows it to look at that. Oh, I know what that log line is, and I can present the relevant data out of that log entry.
Mm-hmm.
Really cool. So anytime I hear more logging, it excites me. It's one of those things that drives me wild about stock Windows and the event viewer and the pain that is. Where if it's a Nix machine, I can drop into the var log directory and just start rooting around and find what I need when I'm troubleshooting, which is another beef I have with Docker, Mr. Casalino. But
your logs are there, man. Your logs are there.
For another day. I would say major for some is it's got enhanced protection against the level 1 terminal fault attack. Excuse me, allergies and the summer, of course. This is one of the security vulnerabilities that's part of the whole Spectre Meltdown fiasco.
Mm-hmm.
The big deal about this is it does protect against the L1TF, but it also recaptures performance that was taken away with the early mitigations of that attack, which I think is on a lot of people's minds is, okay, fine, security, but I just bought these jazzy new processors and I'm going to cut my performance in half.
Right. That came out just at the beginning of the year, didn't it? That the Spectre and all of those Meltdown bugs, that was just the beginning of this year, wasn't it?
If this year is 2018.
Okay, so it's been a minute. Sorry.
It might feel
it all just runs together, right?
It does. It does.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's one. I have a lot of customers ask me about how I feel about those vulnerabilities.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a security expert in terms of deep dive into a processor architecture.
Right.
So I do have to do a fair bit of blog reading and kind of mix together different opinions to kind of feel, and then my own instinct to feel what my opinion is going to be. But I get a sense that a lot of those vulnerabilities are more of a risk to a multi-tenant environment where you've got multiple customers sharing hardware, like a cloud provider.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, even you didn't buy the hardware, you're paying a premium for the consumption of the service.
Right.
But it's not for you to worry about unless basically you make sure your cloud provider is mitigating against them, and then maybe heck, you're paying for the mitigation of the performance, the performance losses in your consumption fees, yada yada. On premise, you have a cluster of hosts and you control them completely, and you control the workloads that run on them. I don't know how concerned I would necessarily be about those particular vulnerabilities.
Well, as you go through seeing as I just did this, as you go through the KB articles on like VMware, it's got a nice little flowchart that says, do you have capacity to turn this on? Yes, no. Do you trust all of the workloads that are running in your environment? Yes, then go ahead and leave it off, but we don't recommend doing this. So I absolutely see it being something that's in that multi-tenancy environment where you don't necessarily have control over what's running.
Right.
Yeah.
Matt, that'd be a great idea. Grab that link and we can put that up on the blog post
Okay.
for the episode if people want to. I was unaware of that flow chart. It's really good, really good catch.
It's like 5 blocks, but sure, it's a flow chart.
Yeah, no, that'll work. It reminds me of my favorite waterfall chart, which is the vSphere update order of precedence when you're updating, let's say, Horizon View.
Mm-hmm.
Right? What components do I have to do first, and in what order? It's another one of my favorites. So you said VMware flowchart. Gimme.
All right, I'll send that over.
And now for the real headlining feature: these increased configuration maximums and enhancements with 6.7 update 2.
Ooh.
You can have 256 vCPUs and 6 terabytes of VRAM in a single VM.
Imagine how big of a Plex server I could build with that.
You could do quite a few remote transcodes simultaneously.
Totally.
If you run SAP HANA, that very well might be in your ballpark. So it is a notable improvement for sure. It also supports Windows Server 2019, that VMware hardware version 15, which includes those maximums, and it also supports 40 and 100 gig Ethernet network and RDMA support too. So following with the technology and more bandwidth as 40 gig becomes more and more common. I mean, I'm speccing out Cisco UCS environments, and basically the default direction where most of their mainline products come is now heading in that 40 gig direction. Do you find the same?
I've been seeing 150, 125, 50, 100 gig being where it's going because
wow, okay.
40 gigs basically for 10 gig channels, and
Yep.
25, 50, 100 is actually scalable. So I saw 40 as that stopgap until we got the 125, 50, 100s out there. That kind of lines up with what I've been reading in my tech blogs and such that I scroll through.
You've seen a lot more of the SFP28 than the 1025 convergence.
Yeah, that's whenever I see something come up about what should I go and it's plus 10 gig or faster than 10 gig, it's always that 25, 50, 100 gig is where it's heading. I will say there's a lot of stuff out there with that 40 gig available in it. I just quoted some Catalyst 9500 16s, and they had a 40 gig module on the side. So I'm gonna, it's still out there, it's still existing, but I'm gonna spec it as a inner switch link for those pair of switches. That kind of a thing.
Sure, yeah. I just went to build out a UCS environment and found that the typical FIs that I go to, my go-to is my 6248s, right?
Mm-hmm.
My multiple 10 gig ports are end of sale now. Well, they're going end of sale end of May.
Mm-hmm. And
there's a new platform out there, the 6454, which is the 1025. It basically is a direct replacement for the 6248s. And for a minute there, though, I thought, well, I'm just going to go all 40 and then do the adapters to link up to the Nexus at the top of the rack. But the 6454 was actually the way forward.
Yeah.
Here we go with model alphabet soup. Sorry.
Always. I live here and I quote stuff all day long, and I still struggle with it.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to bring back a little mini segment that's kind of taken a few weeks hiatus, and that is the I've never seen that before segment here. Do you have anything by chance, Matt? I do. Do you? I'm letting you lead off if you have anything.
Oh, anything I've seen, haven't seen before.
You've been in this industry for so long, and yet here you say, I've never seen that before, way too frequently.
Not so much. Not so much anymore.
Lucky.
I'm
lucky.
I counter that and say that, if I haven't seen it, then I probably don't know what I haven't seen.
Right.
Well, so there's those common things that you see all the time. But
I have a doozy.
What'd you get?
I have a doozy, and here's what's weird. This is not a technical point here. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
technical issue, and yet it happened. So I'm not going to name the vendor. I'm not going to name the customer. But it was a controller head swap, and it was a shelf add, a shelf expansion,
Mm-hmm.
2 phases. So it was after hours, and the controller head swap took longer than planned due to log uploads to the mothership and just timing of things. It had to be after hours because the customer was extraordinarily sensitive to even the possibility of downtime. Now, overall, there was zero downtime during this entire operation, which was expected, so it wasn't a problem. But unless you don't think long night is a problem in going over your estimated outage, or not outage, but maintenance window.
Totally a
So
problem.
we get through the head swap late, but done. Good, clean. Now it's time to expand the storage and start. We're adding drives into the shelf. The customer had already racked the shelf, railed, powered everything in the rack. So we're putting it in, and we go and we look at the UI after we've added these drives, and we're checking in with support, and support says your SAS cables are reversed, and we're going through documentation. We're looking at the back of the shelf, the ports, and we're like, no, they're not. They're absolutely perfect. You're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going on for an hour and a half, and we're trying to figure it out. We go into the GUI, and it's showing a graphical representation of the drives that we've inserted into the shelf. It's half populated.
Mm-hmm.
Why does that look like the drives are on the other side of the shelf? We put them in left to right. Why are they in right to left here?
Mm-hmm.
Something's off. I go over back and look at the shelf, and I step back, and the shelves are very,
Is it upside down?
The drive shelf is upside down physically. And I go, well, how? I mean, the only way I can think that this happened is if they put the L brackets in that the shelf just sits on, actual rails. There's no way that would have been installed incorrectly, right? So we decom all that additional storage. We remove all the drives. I pull the shelf. The rails are up. It's a 2U shelf. The rails are upside down. So the rail is on the top hat, the top
little
U.
hook. Yeah.
How?
I don't know. I guess I'm not. I've seen enough that I'm not surprised by people anymore.
But
every day on the road and the technology, I don't know.
At a certain point, I always try to look inward too and say, what could you have done? And I guess theoretically, I could have absolutely checked that the orientation of the shelf was proper before we did step one. But at what point do you have to make certain assumptions? Like, I don't know. Is the shelf present? Yes, it is. I'm looking at it.
Right.
Just it's definitely going on my checklist now. I'll tell you that.
Is it the right side up? Yeah. Yeah. I will say there's a bunch of stuff that I've added to my checklist, and that might be one of them. Is the gear in right side up? I know I've added power and double checking power requirements. That's a big one. But no, I've not. I don't think I've gotten that far to see something that,
we are coming up. We are well over 20 years, 22 years in an employed capacity, and then even years beyond that doing it myself as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
But never seen it. Never ever seen it. So,
well,
yeah. I
first time for everything.
That's been the subject of a few laughs over the last few weeks. But yeah, so add that to your checklist. And here's the thing: the shelf had the three. It had the power indicator. It had the shelf ID, and then the shelf ID being 00. That's not upside down, right? You can't tell.
Right.
And then there was a fault light.
Is this
so
a 6 or a 9?
The little tiny icon had it had a little check mark. And when I looked, I'm like, oh, that check mark is upside down, but nothing that you would see from quick glance. Just Yup. So that's a nice return back to the never seen that before segment with a doozy there.
There you go.
Matt, well, once again, congratulations on the VCP. That is
Thank
awesome.
you, sir.
I'm envious, and maybe they'll send me away one of these days.
I can, I'm tracking all of our certification. Which one do you want to go get?
Never mind. I'm busy. I gotta
There, see, that's
go.
how it works.
Well, hey, if you liked this, let us know. Review us on your favorite podcast app. Shoot us an email at podcast@ivoxy.com. If there's anything you want to talk about, we like talking about things. We like going off on tangents. Give us a tangent. Give us multiple tangents. We will definitely get lost in the weeds. We will shave the yak, right?
Let's shave it all.
If
7
you have
days
a yak,
later, we're
keep
still
your
working
yak
on
locked
it.
up.
Yeah.
Look out. We're on a mission. But hit us up on Twitter, on LinkedIn, the email. Check us out at ivoxy.com. If you want to talk about certain things, we can definitely go there. You have anything to add, Matt?
I'm happy. Happy spring's here. Happy it's finally getting some sun outside, and I'm able to see the road on my way home. So I'm super excited about that. Thanks for chatting with me this morning, Yeti.
Yeah, appreciate your time as well. It's always a good time. And thank you everyone for listening to Data Center Therapy. Have a great day.